Hello everyone, Medic Level Up here. This is going to be the second part to ventricular enlargement. So previously we studied about right ventricular hypertrophy. Today it's going to be about left ventricular hypertrophy, which you're going to encounter much more commonly as compared to RVH. There's a lot of causes of LVH, which is systemic hypertension. You could have dilated cardiomyopathy. You could have hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. You could even have heart failure, which is going to cause constant remodeling of the heart, and it's going to cause left ventricular hypertrophy. There's plenty of voltage criteria for LVH. Just to name a couple of them, there's Framingham voltage criteria, there's Sokolow-Lyon criteria, there's Cornell criteria. But for the purpose of this video, and the stuff that I want you to remember, is the Framingham and the Sokolow-Lyon criteria. So these two are primarily what we're going to be using throughout this video. So we're gonna start off by drawing a heart, and in this heart we're going to draw a fairly hypertrophied left ventricle. So you can see that the current is flowing from right to left inside the LV, and all of these changes are going to be much more apparent, much more visible in the lateral leads, which is one augmented voltage limb lead, left side, and the V4, V5, and V6 chest leads. So these are basically the lateral leads where you're going to see the changes of LVH. So let's pick up the Sokolow-Lyon criteria. It's fairly easy to remember, so what you need to remember is the depth of the S wave in V1 plus the height of the R wave in V6. If it's more than 35 millimeters, more than 35 small boxes, you can say that this ECG is suggestive of LVH. Let's take a look at an example of this. So essentially what's happening is we've got V1 on one extreme, V6 on the other extreme, and you've got a deep S wave, which is basically the current going away from lead V1 into the left ventricle. Similarly, you've got a tall positive R wave going towards V6 into the LV. So essentially we're looking at pretty much the same current from different aspects, and these are mirror images. So let's assume that the depth of the S wave is 19 millimeters and the height of the R wave is 20 millimeters. So you bring these two together. So 19 is going to be V1S and 20 is going to be V6R. So 19 plus 20 is equal to 39 millimeters, 39 small boxes. Now you can say that this ECG is suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. Let's take a look at Framingham voltage criteria. So Framingham voltage criteria is primarily dependent on AVL, which is one of the lateral leads again. So if the height of the R wave is more than 11 millimeters in AVL, you can confidently say that this ECG is again suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. So essentially you have to remember two numbers over here. So for the Cornell it's 35 millimeters, and for the Framingham it's 11 millimeters in AVL. I've put an image of a strain pattern over here, which is very characteristic of left ventricular hypertrophy. Essentially what strain pattern is, it's asymmetric T-wave inversion plus ST segment depression. So if you draw a line across here, you can see that the ST segment is depressed. And if you draw a vertical line across the T-wave, you can see that there is an initial downsloping and then an abrupt takeoff, which makes it an asymmetric T-wave inversion. I'm going to give you two more examples. So you can pretty much have a flattened ST segment, and you can have an R wave and a different morphology of an ST segment depression and a asymmetric T-wave inversion. These patterns are known as strain equivalent patterns, and these are pretty much suggestive of LVH as well. Now, one thing I want you to consider when you're interpreting an ECG is if you take into account only the voltage criteria, yes, it has high sensitivity to diagnose LVH, but if you take into account voltage criteria plus strain, it has a 90% sensitivity of diagnosing LVH on an ECG. But if you take into account voltage plus strain plus the right clinical context, so say it's an 80-year-old with long-term hypertension, then the sensitivity jumps up to even 95%, and you can very confidently say that this ECG is suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. Of course, sometimes with LVH, you can also see a left atrial abnormality, which we've discussed in previous videos, so you can get a prolonged P wave, a bifid P wave, or even a predominant negative aspect of the P wave in lead V1. I want you to remember one more thing before we come to the conclusion. It's that all of this criteria is supposed to be for people who are age above 35 years of age. If someone comes up to you and tells you that this person, we've got an ECG from a person who's less than 35 years of age, this criteria doesn't apply. So what happens then? So basically the Sokolow-Lyon criteria turns over to 53 millimeters then. So just try and remember an easy mnemonic. It's 35, you flip the numbers, and it's 53 millimeters. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching.